Distillation is a way of separating stuff by boiling it. That might seem a little strange at first, until you realize that your whole life depends on distillation. Not only your life, but the life of everything alive on land depends on distillation. And distillation is so common, it's done so effortlessly all around you, that it soaks you every month that you're alive. What do I mean? Think about the ocean. The ocean has a couple things in it. It's got water in it, and it's got salt. What if you wanted to separate those two things? They're dissolved into such small pieces you could never do it mechanically, or at least it would be difficult. So another thing you could do is you can boil the water. And that happens naturally when the sun beats down on it. The sun beats down on the water of the ocean heats up, and it evaporates into clouds. So the steam is constantly coming off of the ocean because the heat of the sun is heating that ocean water up. So that steam rises and rises and rises in the atmosphere until it gets cold. It gets to a point of the atmosphere where it gets colder. And at that point, when it starts to get cold, the gas, the steam, condenses. It condenses into clouds. And the wind carries those clouds from one place to another. So those clouds are condensed steam. And at a certain point, once it gets condensed enough, then it starts to rain back down, right? And you get the rain. And now, at this point, you get fresh water. And so you started with the ocean, with salt and water in it, but when the sun heated up, right, the sun heats it up, it only gets it hot enough for the water to boil. The salt does not get hot enough to boil. The salt has it requires more temperature to boil. It takes more heat to make salt boil than it does to make water boil, to make salt turn into a gas. And so the heat from the sun is enough to make the water boil. It's not enough to make the salt sort of become a gas. And so the water leaves the salt behind. It forms these clouds. They condense until they rain back down, and now the water is separated from the salt in fresh water. You can imagine going through that process for long enough, heating up a whole ocean long enough, where all of the water in the ocean would evaporate, and all you'd be left with was salt. And that actually has happened in some places. This is a salt flat in Bolivia, but in several places throughout the world, the ocean has been 300 to 400 feet higher and lower than what it is right now at different periods in Earth's history. And when it was higher, it filled in these areas. As it went down, the pockets that it got stuck in, sort of saltwater lakes, evaporated, and they left behind the salt in the ocean, all at the bottom, in a little layer at the bottom of the ocean. The water from that ocean was distilled away. This water that evaporated from the ocean, that you separated from the salt through boiling, that water is distilled. And all of the fresh water that you drink every day, the fresh water that waters plants and supports ecosystems on land, all of that fresh water is distilled water. It's water that was separated from ocean water through boiling. So that process of separating stuff by boiling it, that is distillation. Now, what we are going to do is sort of replicate this process, but in a laboratory on a very small scale. So let me show you what our apparatus will look like, and we'll talk about what everything is in this picture, what it's called, some things to know about it, how to put all this together. But in general, this is a distillation apparatus. And the idea here is that in this distillation apparatus, you have some sort of a mixture. That's like your ocean with water and salt in it. And the heat is not coming from the sun in this case, it's coming from something called a heating mantle. That's this heat source that we have below it. And again, we're going to discuss each of these things one at a time and discuss how to put all this together. But for now, you have your sun, this heating source. It's heating up your ocean. The steam from that ocean rises, and you can measure the temperature there. And these glass pieces are sort of channeling it. So if you're thinking about the analogy, this would be like the steam coming off of the ocean, coming off of the ocean. And what happens at this point in this apparatus is you try to form clouds, right? The clouds are water condensing, and this glass piece is called a condenser. It tries to make the steam colder so that it liquefies again, and then it drips into your freshwater container, right? Freshwater container. So this setup is a lot like rain, right? You have your original ocean mixture with salt and water in it. You heat it up so that the water boils and the salt doesn't. So you just put enough heat for one of the things in the mixture to boil. The other one stays behind. You channel that steam, cool it down so that it sort of rains back down, forms clouds and rains back down, and you collect the rainwater, the fresh water separated from the salt in that container on the right. So that's the concept behind distillation. You're separating stuff by boiling it. You take a mixture and you heat it up just enough for one of the things in the mixture to boil, but not enough for the other to boil. And then you make that steam condense and you collect it in a separate container. That's the concept behind distillation. So now let's sort of zoom in and look piece by piece how to set up this apparatus, what each of these things are called, and some things to note about them.